Hi everybody. I know that this week there has been a terrible week in the markets, but that doesn't mean that financial planning rules change. I mean, investing is stressful, but there's still things that we need to know about financial planning. So today I'm going to talk about the RRIF, so I'm going to tell you about the basics of what a RRIF is and potentially when you should decide to take a RRIF. And this is going to be different for everybody, of course, as is everything in financial planning. And let's just get started, I guess. So what in the world is a riff? In music, a riff is an ostinato, a repeated chord progression, pattern, or melody. The riff is the base of the musical composition. And so generally speaking, when my buddies and I get together in the garage and jam out after we're done, we're like, man, we riffed so hard. But that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is the Registered Retirement Income Fund, which you will see as RRIF or RIF, which is just Retirement Income Fund. It's something that you eventually have to convert your RSP to. Well, you don't necessarily have to, but at some point in time your RSP is going to either be converted into a RRIF, a life annuity, or you're just going to cash out your RSP and pay a whole bunch of tax all at once. So today I'm just going to talk about the RRIF. And you don't have to take the RRIF at any specific point in time until the year that you turn 71. You have to convert your RSP into a RRIF by December 31st of that year. And all that means now is that you can no longer add into your RSP, and you have to start taking out at least a minimum amount of money out of your RRIF every single year. You can take it out monthly, quarterly, annually, however you want to do it. And the government has tables based on your age saying this is the minimum amount of money that you have to take out of your RRIF every year. So if you're 72, the minimum amount you have to take out is 5.4%. And I'll put the graph up on the side. So that means if you're 72, you have a RRIF, you have $100,000 in it, you're going to need to take out at least $5,400 that year. You can take out as much money as you want as long as you take out the minimum. Everything that you take out of a RRIF, just the same way as taking money out of your RSP, is 100% taxable. So in this person's case, they took out $5,400. That $5,400 is going to be taxable just like they made $5,400 from an employer. Now, if you took it out of an RSP, there's going to be withholding tax. In that case, in one thing over $5,000, they would have had withholding tax of 20%. But when you're taking out of a RRIF, they don't take the withholding tax on the minimum withdrawals out of the RRIF, but that does not mean that you aren't going to owe tax on that like it was income. So what I would do if you're not good with budgeting and setting aside taxes once you're in retirement is talk to your financial planner or your accountant and figure out what your average tax bill is going to be, and then just have that amount of tax withheld at source when you're taking out your RRIF payments. That way it'll be a wash at the end of the year, just like when you were employed. And you just keep it easy like that. That's how I would do that. What else do we want to talk about? You can choose to turn your RSP into a RRIF whenever you want. I could do it right now if I wanted, but I can no longer add to my RSP if it's a RRIF. You can also have as many RRIFs as you want. So you might have one RRIF with, Royal Bank, for example, and then another RSP with TD that you're allowing to still grow, and one's got GICs. However you want to structure your income in retirement is a big part of it. So there are different things that you can do. One of the better things about converting to a RRIF, and there's a question about this, I thought I talked about it in last week's video, the spousal RSP, but I didn't, is that when you turn your RSP into a RRIF, as long as you're 65 years old, now the government is going to consider that to be pension income, so you can actually start to split this income with your spouse. So if you have all the money in your RSP converted to a RRIF, and now you're taking out $50,000 a year, well, you can split it so you both have $25,000 worth of income, decreasing your tax rate. However, if you just pulled $50,000 out of your RSP, then you're going to have all of that income on yourself, or if you're under 65 years old. So it's important to think about the attribution rules when dealing with spousal RSPs and RRIFs. What's going to happen to your RRIF when you pass away? Exact same rules as the RSP, but I'll go over them again. So you can name a beneficiary for your RRIF, just like you can for your RSP. Could be your spouse, could be your child, could be anybody you want, or could be your estate. If it's your spouse, then it can roll directly to your spouse completely tax-free, and then they could name a new beneficiary. In Alberta, you'd probably just choose it to be the estate, but in provinces where there's like high amounts of probate, for example, in BC and Ontario, well, what you might want to do is say, well, I want this to go to my kids, so they're going to be 50-50 beneficiaries on this RRIF. That way that money stays outside of the estate and isn't subject to probate tax. So that's something to think about. It is going to be completely taxable as like a one-time disposition if it goes to anybody other than your spouse or a financially dependent child or grandchild. And I'm not the best with these rules for sure, but that is talking about a disabled child or grandchild that is financially dependent on you. There are rules where you can somehow flow the RRIF into maybe an RDSP or into their RSP. So it's something that, you know, I know can work. I just need to look into it a little bit more. Now this is why people start to hate RSPs, is because maybe they've got too much money in their RSP and then their minimum that they need to take out is more than they want. So they have $1 million in there and they have to take out $52,000 a year, but they have other assets that they can live on and they don't want to be taxed on that amount of money. Or what can also happen is your parents pass away and they have $1 million in their RSP and you're like, great, I'm rich, I'm going to have so much money, not realizing the fact that immediately it's like your parents made $1 million in the year that they passed away, so the government is going to tax that at over 50% in almost every province, leaving you with about $500,000. So RSPs and RRIFs are absolutely fantastic if you treat them as a pension income and, you know, a pension, like a pension growing and then a pension coming out in a normal lifespan. They work perfectly. However, life does not work perfectly, and that's why we need to plan around it. And sometimes people just realistically do have too much money in their RSPs. So it can make a lot of sense to start melting the RSPs down well before even retirement sometimes, and well before you actually have to RRIF in certain cases, and doing something with the assets outside of these registered accounts. There are a whole bunch of things that you can do in those cases. Now, as I said before, I can't tell just the general public when to actually RRIF, because this is going to be different for every single person. It's just like, when should you take CPP or when should you take OAS? It totally depends on your personal financial situation and what is happening in your life and your longevity and all of these other things. So this can have a huge impact on your retirement plan. And just some questions that you need to ask before thinking about this is, how is it going to affect your government benefits going forward? How is it going to affect your ability to split income with your spouse? Is this income going to last your entire life? Do you need to delay it or take it early so you can delay CPP and OAS? Maybe you need to do that. What are your estate goals? If you have other estate goals, well, maybe it's a good idea to get a lot of the money out of these registered accounts into more tax efficient vehicles. And is the prolonged tax deferral of having that money in the RSP for longer going to be beneficial compared to melting it down early? And I don't have these answers unless I'm looking at your specific situation and then making certain assumptions. So as always, as I've said many times before, once you have a plan in place, I think things are pretty good for most people around my age. But when it starts getting complicated is, the 5 years before retirement and the 5 years that you've entered retirement, and making these really important decisions that are going to impact your income for the rest of your life. So if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us, because we'd be happy to discuss if working together and helping you might be a good fit for all of us, and we'd be happy to help and answer questions at any point in time. If you haven't, please subscribe. Stay safe. Hopefully everybody's good, and keep calm and patient with the market. I know it sucks. We're not having fun at all. It sucks, but this too shall pass, and one day we'll forget about it and look back and say, oh, remember how bad that was? Well, yeah. So thanks again. We'll see you next week.